Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. My name is Ramesh Bichlani. I stay and work at Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, and that's where I'm speaking from. We have in the ashram these days a guest, Aditi Kaul. Aditi is a highly qualified psychologist. She has a PhD in psychology, and she considers herself to be a perpetual student. She says she's still learning, which is good, but then she has also started teaching. She teaches psychology at the Oro University in Surat. Welcome.
Thank you. So today I have a lot of questions for you, but I think I want to begin with understanding your viewpoint on the two very important words, idea and experience. And how do you see it? What comes first, idea or experience? So what is your take on that?
Well, to some extent, it's like the chicken and egg question, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And since you are a psychologist and psychology is closely related to philosophy, one can roughly say, I mean, these things are not clear cut or there are always exceptions, but one can say that the approach in Indian philosophy or Indian psychology has been different from that in the West. In India, the tradition has been to first have the experience, give great importance to the experience, greater than the ideas or the theory that emerges from the experience. So the primary thing is experience, and then a person may either leave it at the level of the experience or may try to describe the experience in words, and that is how many of our scriptures have originated, from spiritual experience. And spiritual experience and experience which leads to psychology or understanding of the human mind cannot be really separated. And some of them have not just tried to put the experience in words, but have also tried to build a philosophy around it. Because the experience, for example, may be that of an absolute reality, the divine, which is imperishable and constant, and which has an all-pervasive presence in the universe. Now, that much may be a part of the experience, but then to further extend it and say that this imperishable reality was always there, will always be there, and that it created the universe by itself, becoming the universe, and therefore it is present in each part of the universe, and that there has been an evolution going on. The evolution has been that of consciousness, and the human beings are unique in being able to evolve through their own efforts, and therefore they can accelerate the process of evolution, and that the purpose of human life is to evolve because human being has that unique ability as well as the urge to evolve. Now, all this is a part of a philosophy, and that is therefore the purpose of human life. So, to relate that experience to a philosophy so that it becomes more meaningful and can find application in life is extending from that original experience, and that is how we have got Vedanta, which has been the most popular spiritual philosophy that we had. But then, the intellect is so versatile that even starting from the same experience and sticking to the same basic fundamentals of Vedanta, one can emphasize one aspect of Vedanta or the other, and therefore within Vedanta also there are further schools within Vedanta. I will not get into that, but basically in the Indian tradition, we have proceeded from experience. Of course, before that there might have been a question, an intense aspiration to answer that question. Questions like, who am I? How did it all begin? And so on and so forth. So the person embarked on this journey, a spiritual quest, in search of answers to such basic questions. And if he got the answers were in the form of an experience. And then around that experience, he may build a philosophy. In the West, by and large, it has been a little different. They also start with a question, but then instead of trying to embark on a spiritual quest, which may require silencing the surface activity of the mind and going deeper within, they try to use the intellect, and the intellect can go to pretty high levels, because refined intellect, if it is used properly, can argue about these questions, and through those arguments reach conclusions which are quite similar to those which are there in philosophy based on experience. But then because for them it is mainly a mental exercise, they go straight from the question to a philosophy. The philosophy tries to answer those questions. And the approach has been different. So for us, and the primary thing has been, in our tradition, the primary thing has been experience, and from there to go to a philosophy. And for them, they straight away they go from the question to the philosophy. And one might say that sometimes, this approach, using only the mental approach, may look the easier approach, but it has two pitfalls. One is that it always leaves us in doubts. Because the experience cannot be questioned. Philosophy can be questioned. You may have 100 reasons which support the philosophy, but then somebody else can come up with another half a dozen questions which the person who has proposed the philosophy also cannot answer satisfactorily. Whereas experience cannot be questioned, because the person says that I have had this experience, the person had it, and therefore you cannot question, you can question his experience. You may not have the same experience, but you cannot question for that reason that that person could not have had that experience. So experience is beyond question, whereas the philosophy and the ideas can be questioned. The second pitfall of, apart from the fact that you can always raise questions about a cerebral exercise or a mental exercise, which cannot be always satisfactorily answered, the second pitfall of this approach has been that sometimes it can be very laborious and time consuming. If you first had the experience, then it is much easier to arrive at some conclusions. For example, take a simple thing like, what is it that will make us happy? Bertrand Russell, being a philosopher, has come up with a whole book on the secret of happiness. And after going through a lot of arguments, what does he reach? The conclusion that he reaches is that the key to happiness lies in overcoming chronic self-absorption. Now, what is it except that you have to transcend your ego? That is what it comes to. But then he had to go through 100 pages of arguments before arriving at that conclusion. Whereas a person who has built a spiritual philosophy around the experience can arrive at that conclusion much faster, that since we are all one, that has been his experience, has been a unitive experience, an experience of oneness. So if we are one, that oneness inspires love, and love means transcendence of the ego, because ego and the love do not go together. It is it's possible to love only when you start looking beyond your immediate little self. So that is what. So these have been the two pitfalls of trying to answer questions purely as a mental exercise. But then one can go from experience to a philosophy, or from a philosophy to an experience. If the person is familiar with a philosophy, then he may like to verify it, and through his own experience. That's also possible. And in fact, one can say that for most people, because the sages, the saints and the rishis who have had this type of experience, from which they developed a philosophy in India, for the originators, yes, experience was the starting point. But for most of us, when we read what they wrote in terms of describing their experience or the philosophy which they arrived at, for us, it is basically the idea with which we start, the knowledge with which we start. And if some of us feel strongly motivated, we may try to verify that experience through our own quest.
I think one thing which was very interesting, which you pointed out, is that how when something comes out of experience, it's very precise, it's very crisp and clear. And it reminded me of how, if you look at our scriptures, we call them sutras, like how the Yoga Sutras are very short words, but they have so much of deeper meaning. But then if I look at the Western philosophy, how you said pages after pages, pages after pages, because it's an intellectual exercise. And it's seen in the education system, like especially in the current generation, when you see, the moment you ask the question, the first thing is to just look at the internet and see what the others have said. So our identification with the others' ideas. Rather, if we can have a system in the education setup that first we turn to experience and see that what do you experience about it? Or what is your experience, or what do you think about it, and then going to other people's idea and then kind of seeing how they can come together. So that is one contribution which we can bring into the education of how focusing more on the experience of what we are presenting and not quickly identifying with other people's idea. So what do you think of it? Can we bring this shift?
Sure, exactly. I mean, we need that type of a shift because only that way, I mean, the knowledge that the student will have will be properly internalized and the student will be able to apply it. This type of knowledge picked up from here and there not only remains at a superficial level, it also encourages the student to think not with his own head but somebody else's head.
Yes.
So that is never a problem.
I think this is what is often I've seen in academics, no, like what the philosopher said or what the psychologist said. It's very important to know what they said, but then also to bridge it with what is your own understanding, like just initiating an original thinking in the student about the concept and more at an experiential level. So this can be brought.
Sure, exactly.
Right now. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.